Hello and welcome to John and James Live. My name is John Hastings and I am with my co-host,
James CeeLo.
James CeeLo. And we met each other yesterday for the first time, James, didn't we?
I'm still recovering.
We didn't even take pictures. We didn't do any videos. We could have done like a slow-mo run up towards each other. We've been working as a duo for the last, 2.5 months? And that's the first time. That's life now, isn't it? I haven't even seen my brother. My brother lives on the coast about three hours away, and I haven't seen him for about 2 years, I don't think, which is sad, isn't it?
Terrible, mate. That is terrible, terrible. It was a surreal moment though, wasn't it?
For you, yeah. For me?
For you, it was just like
just
breathing.
Another day. It's just another day.
Standard. Just standard.
Standard. Yeah, it's always a bit surreal. Somebody said it's like these teenagers when they meet their gaming friends. Apparently, I don't game.
Allegedly, people, I've no idea.
Yeah, apparently
I'm
people
too old for that
play games.
Mate, we've gone a bit casual today, haven't we? It's like the T-shirt. Oh, it's Dress Down Friday.
Yes, it's summer's around the corner. If we just hit spring, I don't know what the dates are, but it's definitely warmer outside.
It's spring.
So
I think it's spring.
T-shirts are out, but it was a good day, wasn't it? It was good to catch up.
It was a great day.
Social. And funnily enough, we was at an investment firm, wasn't we? We won't say who, but it was very interesting and had quite an interesting presentation that talked a lot about the things that we're talking about on the lives, really, with investments, tech, AI, what's going on in the world, who's investing where, what to look out for. Housing crisis. So it was all about that stuff. These investment firms are obviously trying to look after money for people. So it was very interesting being in the heart of London, in the inside, to see what's going on, James.
Yeah. Inside the halls of finance.
Man, it is beautiful in there, though, isn't it, James?
It was a lovely building. The toilets were particularly nice.
I said that to my wife. I was like, "Oh my!" I was looking for the urinal. There is no urinal. You've got like your own bathroom.
Cubicle, yeah. It was a self-contained cubicle, wasn't it? It had everything you needed in it.
That cubicle is the size of my apartment.
Wow. Well, that just sums it up, mate, doesn't it?
Yeah, it was just
sums it up right there.
Yeah, there was a lot of there's just a lot of buzziness when you go to Central, isn't there? There's so much. We talk about what we talk about today, inequality. But there are people out there with a lot of dough. It looks like there's a lot of money being invested, isn't there?
Yeah, there's pockets of serious wealth.
Someone's mopping it up. But today we'll talk about, there was a podcast with a Diary of CEO with Stephen Bartlett, and he had a guy, Gary Stevenson, on, who's an economist, ex-trader. I think he still is a trader, but he's not working in the city. He was one of the best traders in the world. And he wrote a book called A Trading Game. So he's sort of revealing what it's like inside of Canary Wharf to work in these investment firms, the ins and outs of it, and how inequality, he thinks, is going to bring down the economy. His views are tax the very wealthy. I think 1% wealth tax over assets over 10 million. So if you've got assets of 12 million, then you'd tax basically 1% of 2 million, which would be like 20 grand a year. So obviously, if you're worth hundreds of millions, that's going to work out to be more. But on the other hand, we had a Daniel Priestley. So he runs a company, I think it was called Dent. He's wrote a book, E-Person of Influence. He's got Scorecard. He's a very successful entrepreneur. I've been actually following Daniel for, it's got to be 10 years. I think I had Key Person of Influence at least 10 years ago. And I filled in an online form recently, and to my surprise, I didn't know it was going to happen, but the Key Person of Influence book, a physical book, turned up at my door.
Wow.
And I thought, there's a reason why this guy's successful. And those kind of small touches, there's so many touch points, and he's everywhere.
Yeah.
Everything's very slick. I've been on many webinars. Oh, James, you're a busy man.
Me not putting my phone on silent. Apologies, everybody. It's on silent now.
And yeah, he's a very successful entrepreneur, and he's been on Diary of a CEO quite a few times now. And he's got some, he thinks taxing the rich is a problem. There is many millionaires leaving the UK to obviously flock into places like Dubai because of the more, I don't know, tax-friendly environments for them. But what do we do about inequality? So I've got some statistics here, and we'll sort of give an overview. I don't know if did you get a chance to watch some of it, James, or did you watch all of it? I watched all of it.
No, I didn't watch all of it. I watched probably the first half of it. And obviously Gary is a man after your own heart, isn't he? And I think we'll probably get that out of the way at the beginning of the podcast, that he comes from a council house background, very much like yourself. So I can see where the affinity comes in, that, suddenly all made sense.
It all made sense, isn't it? My affinity with Gary. But
it's
I know we like to have
the voice of the working man, the proletariat. So
but I would say
I think you've modelled yourself on him, mate. To be honest,
do you think so? Well, I'm older than Gary, and I would like to say.
Oh, so who came first then, Gary or John?
And mine was a different level of poverty. Gary had a mum and dad. No, my dad went missing, and his mum and dad had a house.
Poverty like you, mate.
Mate, I didn't even. My mum
You're
and dad
on another level.
I didn't even have a dad, and I didn't have a house because it was all council.
I didn't have a house. I had a matchbox to live in.
Basically, I was brought up by just a stray fox. On the road.
And not an attractive fox. Not one of those good-looking ones.
A shaggy fox.
A really shabby, shitty-looking fox.
Yeah, so Gary and I should have a little poverty off. Is that what they call them? A little poverty. Who had it worse?
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, I had it worse.
Okay.
Gary had a mum and dad, and they had a house, so I would see that as upper middle class, even though it was working class. So it was, But there's all different levels. There's people that had it worse than me. So, but it's difficult, and he's obviously a very. A little bit. It's capitalism, James.
Yeah. All fair.
Who's the poorest? Even though it goes up, it goes down. So Gary.
Just a little bit of soot on the side of your face, just a little smudge of soot. When you've been up the chimney.
Up the old chimney sweep. But there are outliers in poverty in terms of people that do get out. Gary's one of them. Stephen Bartlett's obviously not from a affluent background, and Daniel Priestley's not from an affluent background as well. So let's just get that out of the way. There is something they call a survivorship bias. So if you've done well, you seem to project your own subjectivity of your situation to think that other people can do it as well, not taking into account the multitude of variables, whether that's your personality type, timing of the markets, picking the right niche product, externals. You might have a sick mum, you might have something else that happens to you, a car accident, who knows what could happen to you. But there are 1,000,001 variables for every Stephen Bartlett or Daniel Priestley or somebody like a Joe Wicks in the fitness industry. There are millions and millions of other people that probably worked equally as hard, but not quite the same trajectory or the wrong timing or just the wrong look or something was off, and the outcomes were completely different. And there's also a difference in early wins. So if you have any early wins in your career, it can set the tone for secondary wins, even if people say they lose money. And people do go bankrupt, even people that made a lot of money and then make it back. But if you've got some early wins, normally those people have actually put some stuff aside, whether they've built some assets and things like that, or they've got some cash stored somewhere and they shut the business down. The business goes bankrupt, but they're not personally going bankrupt. It's a business thing, so it's not a personal thing. So they could have withdrawn. I know people personally that have gone bankrupt. The business has, the LTD company, but they've still kept hold of their £1 million house and a lot of the money that was inside of that, even when administrators come in as well. So there are loopholes around that. So it's a difficult one to judge. But what they're saying, James, is at the moment we've got a big inequality problem, and we can sort of tell by the articles that I've put out recently when I said is lifestyle declining from the 1970s, like today, and we've said it with your children, with other people who are maybe 40 and below. Have they got any chance of buying a property anymore? Is the quality of life actually going down? Are they working more for less? Is there less jobs for life? Which there obviously is. Maybe that was a thing. The sort of baby boomer generation. It was a boom, wasn't it, at that point? And the economy took off. There were 40, 50 years jobs. There were these golden handshake. What do they call those final salary pensions? Which I know some of the people that were in the bank, that those final salary pensions were just... They were amazing. I think they're stopped. They've stopped now.
Yeah, more than likely.
Yeah, you could buy a property, couldn't you, back in the day? We've gone through it with yourself in terms of how much you bought your first property for, like 45 grand or something. And you couldn't even buy a shed in London for 45 grand, let alone no. That's what people are paying for their average car, let alone a house.
I think when I bought that, my salary was about 11,000 a year. It was either 9, 10 or 11 grand a year when I bought that, or when my wife and I bought that flat.
Yeah.
So I mean, we were both working, and that's what we could buy back then.
Yeah. If you go further back, when I've done articles, we're looking at 1960, 1950s, then it was, comparisons were, the wage disparity to house price is just ridiculous. And both Stephen Bartlett, Gary Stevenson and Daniel Priestley acknowledged that there is a massive problem. They all agreed on that. They all agreed there's a massive problem with housing. How we fix that, is a difficult one, because we've also done the article on land ownership, haven't we? So was it 30% of land is owned by aristocracy, possibly another 17%, because that's unaccounted for. That's probably historical land that's been kept in the family name, hasn't been sold or updated. So that could be 47% owned by aristocracy. Then you've got 18% on corporations, 17% on oligarchs. And it was only, say, 5% of English land was owned by homeowners. And even out of those homeowners, I think it was about 40% was owned by mortgages. Don't quote me on that one. It's over 40 or 60%. Yeah, but let's say by ease, it was like half of it is mortgaged. So you don't really own it. You're paying off a loan for it. So somebody owns your debt, like Gary says. Rich people own your debt. So even in that 5%, you're probably half that to 2.5% of people who actually own that land. So this is causing major problems. They've been saying for years, James, they're gonna build more houses, meant to be 1.5 million over a period of time. There's all problems with getting land access, planning problems, and it's a difficult one with self-maximization, James, isn't it? Because nobody wants then to have loads of houses built right outside of their house if they've got like a lovely view of the countryside. I get it. Plus, with this capitalist system, the more you increase, on the supply and demand curve, the more houses there are, then technically you would say the less they're worth. So the people that have got them, you sort of want to, in a weird way, reduce the supply, don't you?
It's that
in a lot
NIMBY, isn't it? Not in my backyard type attitude, isn't it? That when you've got it, you want to keep hold of it and protect it. But just, I couldn't get a word in edgeways then, mate. I was just waiting to kind of shoehorn my opinion in.
I've got more, James. I've got more.
You were on a roll there, mate. I love it when you're in full flow. So, I mean,
tell me what you think, James. Tell me what you think.
I will tell you what I think when I've decided what that is. So Gary obviously has a YouTube channel, and you've referred to it lots. And you think about how much information is out there in the public domain. And I believe it's an education piece that we can now begin to understand the way these mechanisms work. And for centuries, we've been kept in the dark, and it's only the people in the know that are able to utilize, money, wealth, the system, loopholes. Now, all of a sudden, the covers have been pulled off, and that information is in the public domain for anybody to look at and to consume. And it's still down to whether people have the intention to do that, to actually go and find that information out. But it is there to be seen and to be consumed in that way that we can now say, I can't use ignorance as an excuse to not improve my situation. That all it takes is a Google search or on YouTube, and you can have all of that information. Now, it's whether you believe the source. So it comes down to the credibility of whoever's giving that information out. Now, on this podcast, you've got 3 people there that you could, if you didn't know Gary, I guess maybe more people potentially would have known Daniel and certainly Stephen. But that was the first time that I'd come across Gary, that you could then say, well, actually, all of that information exists at your fingertips. It's whether you take the time and the trouble to go do the research and find out that information, and then what you do with that information. So are we all in a situation where we feel zero agency over our outcomes and helpless to do anything in terms of change? Or do we take those resources and then start to implement things that can create a different outcome and an alternative trajectory? So it's that learned helplessness to an extent of whether you say, well, actually, we can do something about it given the knowledge base, and that knowledge is freely available. But still, it comes down to what you do with that information, it feels like. Now, going into YouTube and going back to the education system, I think there was a study that a lot of kids were asked what they wanted to do as a job when they grew up. And I don't know what the percentages were, but from memory, they were quite high that they wanted to become YouTubers or do something that was around social media. I mean, we'll have to do the research on what the results of that was, but from memory, it was quite high. So they had this aspirational thing of how they were consuming all of that information and then becoming one of those influencers themselves. Either it was through the knowledge base and sharing, or the majority would have been that they saw that that was a viable way for them to make money, and a lot of money, because that's how they were consuming their information. Again, the percentages are probably going to be very low of people that do make a decent income from it. I would argue.
I would say probably
very low percentages.
Even with professional football, I think it's like 0.1% of players that come through an academy make it to professional. I think it's like the X factor, out of thousands of people that apply, you're going to get one winner. For every Stephen Bartlett, there's millions, like we said, of other people that are just, it's not quite hit the mark, has it, for them? So you've definitely got the outliers, which is a difficult one, isn't it? Let's have a look on this. Check our Stephanie Kelton's The Deficit Myth and David Graeber's Money the First 5,000 Years. Oh, thanks for that, Simon.
Thanks, Simon.
I think I've read... Did David Graeber write Bullshit Jobs, Simon? If I'm correct. I think David Graeber died, actually, recently, sadly. Okay. But I may have read... I think he did. I think I got it on my bookshelf somewhere. But the first 5,000 years with money, I think I've heard of that. But definitely we'll check that out. I appreciate that. But what they was really arguing with Stevenson and Priestley was they was acknowledging with each other the problems. There's a mass inequality problem. There's been a big shift of wealth, especially from COVID. In terms of billionaires and how much their wealth has increased, it says in 2024, billionaire wealth increased by 2 trillion, with 204 new billionaires totaling 2,769 globally. Poverty, nearly half the world's population lives in poverty. 1 in 10 women live in extreme poverty. So it's a problem. I can see it now. I managed to buy a house when I was in Milton Keynes. Got it just before the house prices went up massively. Sold it like 3 years later. Then I had to move back to London. Couldn't afford to buy them, and now I'm in the rental trap. And unless I do something, pretty extraordinary with the business, I'm thinking I'm never going to be able to. I've missed the boat. I'm in the early 40s, and I just think unless something happens with the business and it goes real big, then I've got no parents to give me money. There is nothing going on there in terms of inheritance, so that becomes a problem. And plus, I worked in estate planning for 2 years, so I spoke to maybe 10 people a day from different demographics for 2 years. So I get a good gist from people who were wanting to do their will, and my job was to ask what assets you've got, and then I would upsell them into trusts and asset protection vehicles, basically trying to save from things like care fees, means testing, or if the partner survivor gets remarried, from assets not going to somebody else. So you'd be even surprised that entrepreneurs that have made a few million, I was explaining to them about inheritance tax, and it's like the first they've ever heard of it. I said, look, you're going to get taxed. You're a couple, you're going to get taxed 40% over $1 million. 325 nil rate band, residence nil rate band. After that, you can carry it over because you're married, blah, blah, blah. All of this tax spiel. And they're like, so what you're telling me is I'm going to get taxed a few million quid. And I'm just like, yeah, that's what's going to happen. So now if you're in the real know and you're upper middle class, upper class, you're going to know how to manage your money. You're going to get people who know all the loopholes in terms of offshore accounts, trust. There's lots of land that's owned in trusts abroad, Bermuda, Jersey. The average person on the street, even middle class person, even all the people that work in banks, realistically, haven't got a clue about this, do they? No one really knows how that works. It's only a very few elite people that know how those loopholes work.
Well, that comment that Gary made, that the people that he was working with didn't have a clue. Didn't have a clue,
yeah.
And then you move into sort of governments, and the people that are in power and making decisions in governments, don't have a clue.
Yeah.
It's a worrying state of affairs that there are a few that do actually understand the system, but there are people that we will abdicate responsibility to for our money and our livelihoods that probably have a similar understanding as you have. I mean, maybe you think through training to do the job that they do, the fact that there's the IFA there to safeguard, and these regulations that are there to protect, are they protecting? Is it just a few tick boxes that, well, that's fine. We've done that. We've kind of satisfied that element. But is there something sort of more insidious going on underneath the surface that we're not privy to because we aren't in those circles of power and knowing exactly what it is that's going on? And they're all, laughing their asses off, going, well, we've just hoodwinked the general population. They're thinking that, this is a great deal. Actually, we know that it isn't. So there's the education piece. How do we actually get to know exactly what these auspices are doing? And how can we hope to have the same level of knowledge as these, people that are in positions of power?
That's what Gary was saying, was the inside. There's nobody on those trading floors coming from, working class background. They're all from elite schools. Like he was saying, that he's working in a furniture shop and his colleagues are like playing the oboe and they've got piano lessons and stuff like that. It's a completely different world. And I was listening to another guy about social mobility. It was a great, I'll put the link down on this, actually. It was a great talk about it. And he just said, it's not, it's more of a compound interest in knowledge. So if you're from a rich background and they really do invest in their children in education, and it just compounds. So you're just, it's not that you're better or you're higher IQ. It's just that you've actually been, you've got the piano lessons, you're in classes that are much smaller. So you get more attention. You're encouraged more into education.
I went to private school. The guys that I lost contact with, I didn't keep in contact with any of the guys. I messed up. I could have been in a really good schoolboy network of guys that have gone on to work in the city and become investment bankers and, have done incredibly well for themselves. My kind of background was growing up, again, we didn't have a lot of money. Parents divorced, mother remarried to a guy that did have some money. I then got put into the private school system. And, I would be at school with guys whose parents had serious wealth. Yeah. And I guess I never felt like I fitted in. I always felt like the outsider. I was in a house with a guy whose parents, whose dad was a taxi driver in London. He'd worked as a taxi driver and do sort of 2 or 3 other jobs just to keep his son at private school. So, there were these kind of discrepancies in background of people that did have, serious money, and others that had the money, but through seriously hard graft. Yeah. So backgrounds were very, very different, but it's an interesting environment to be in. Yeah.
And I've got to say that in terms of this podcast with Gary and Daniel, I enjoyed it. And I really liked how they were very civil. I liked how it did get passionate at certain points. And I really like both guys. I can see where both people are coming from. Even if you disagree on the solutions, at least there was an acknowledgement that there is a problem. And that's a good first start. I think that's a great first start.
There should always be the challenge. There should always be somebody asking questions.
Yeah.
I think from what I watched, I sort of watched about half of it, that Daniel was pretty unflustered. He was calm. Yeah. He was, he answered really well, came across as credible, had a lot of information, a lot of stats there, percentage-wise.
I agree. Yeah.
And
Gary was coming for him, wasn't he?
He went for him.
He was cutting in all the time with him. Yeah.
And he was challenging. So I think as a piece of documentary, or as an interaction that was there for everybody to see, it was bloody good.
Yeah.
And, I think there was qualities on all sides. I mean, I haven't watched the end of it. I'll watch it back. I'll watch it later. But from the stuff that I saw, it looked like a good piece of TV.
Yeah, I think it was healthy, and I know Daniel's put out posts to say, look, this is either going to be like Marmite, you're going to hate me or love me, or it's going to be, people are going to be so biased on one side or the other. I just don't think it needs to be like that at all. I can understand where Gary's coming from. I can completely understand where Daniel's coming from as well, because we're in similar positions. I've been an entrepreneur, they would say, probably a bad one, for 20 years, but I've never had my £1 million payout. Yeah, it's been some good lifestyle businesses, but I've known the information. But in terms of net worth, it's not something that's liberated me. I probably at this stage would have been better just being a plumber. But it doesn't mean in 5 years' time, maybe in 5 years' time, I'll hit the jackpot. You never know. Unless you're in the game, you've got no chance, have you? Unless you start a business to go big. And maybe you'll...
As we've said before, mate, it's pulling that trigger, isn't it? It's having all of the knowledge and all of the background and all of the theory, but, mate, it's pulling the trigger every single time.
And being able to survive while you're doing it. Like I said, if you get an early win and you get something behind you that you can survive, if children come along, families come along, it can get more difficult. Like Joe Rogan said it before. He said, look, if I was starting today and I'm a 45-year-old man, I couldn't have done what I did in the past because I just couldn't have taken the risk. So there's a bit of timing in that and finding the right thing at the right time. I
do think risk is relative. Yeah, I do think risk is relative. And risk for one person is not the same as somebody else.
Yeah.
And it's appetite for risk, and it's, whether you believe in what you're doing, whether you're committed to it. And maybe it's a time of life thing, but it's like the priorities, that if something means something to you, then find a way.
Yeah.
That sounds easier said than done, and it is. And it's about the support network you've got around you. But, if you've got a supportive partner, or, there are ways and means that if it's something that you feel really passionate about, then what is more important? If it's just purely the money, the wealth that you're focused on,
it's hard to maintain unless there's people that sell concrete and make millions from it, and I doubt they're that passionate about concrete, but they're business people. They've found something that works. They've doubled down on it. It can happen. But really, it's about, at school, they're teaching you more to get a job, aren't they? This is more, school is geared towards not you creating something. So I completely understand on Daniel's point of view. And he says, find your passion and make it your purpose, Steve Whittle.
Yeah,
I like that. Some people disagree on that, Steve. Some people say, look, if you find your passion, you'll never work a day, in your life. You've got the 1,000 True Fans by Kevin Kelly, which is a famous article on, find 1,000 people who love what you do, and you'll be okay. Some people like, underwater basket weaving, but there might not be any market for it. So there's got to be that balance. I know that Daniel Priestley talks about that. There's a balance between what you're interested in, what the market wants.
I think common sense comes into play as well, isn't it? I mean, you've got to find that situation where it's something that's actually going to, give you a living.
Yeah, and some people don't know, James. How many people have we asked? Even when you ask yourself, you say, "What's your passion?" and you're just like, I don't know. Helping people, they're a little bit on the fence. Are you passionate really about helping people lose weight? Is that,
Well,
if I gave you
mate, this is
£100
it.
million, if I say to somebody, right, I'll give you 100 million, what's your passion? I think people will be a little bit stuck. Steve, well, you're right. My partner and I have survived on her wage for over a year now, whilst I get tough
I
to
hear you,
talk
Steve.
off the ground.
Yeah.
That's our purpose. Yeah, I'm with Steve. I know exactly where you're at, my friend.
On exactly the same page.
I know exactly. It's how long sometimes you can hold out with these things. I know, like Alex Hormozy talks about it. And Vaynerchuk. You think to yourself, can I hold out for a year, 2 years before the tide turns, before you get enough traction, and then maybe it will snowball on the other end. But what I did, sorry to cut in with you, James, I know I'm talking a lot on this one. I was talking a lot last night as well.
Shall I just go? Shall I just leave?
Yeah, I lost my voice, last night.
Verbal diarrhea.
I was
talking
you don't
get
at
out
people.
Much.
I don't get out.
It's like I'm putting a month into one evening.
Poor people, just like I was just talking at them for hours.
Like, rabbit in the headlights. I found myself apologizing all evening. So
sorry,
leaving broken people in your wake that I just sort of follow on and go, I'm really sorry about John. He doesn't get out a lot, and he's got a lot to say.
So as I was saying, James, I've got some
statistics. I'm talking now. You're going to have to listen.
Okay, go on then. Go for it.
No, I've lost my train of thought now.
So we had a TED Talk. It's from Bill Gross's TED Talk, and he said timing accounts for 42% of the difference between success and failure. It's got millions in terms of that TED Talk. So if you get in at the right time, like with the podcast stuff, Joe Rogan was really hit it early. If you look at Joe Wicks on Instagram, really hit it early before anyone was doing it. People like KSI, Mr. Beast, caught the wave of YouTube interaction and live streaming for kids online. If you start the same type of business now, even with people like the Gymshark founders, I've heard loads of talks from him, and he was just saying, look, if we started today and we was trying to do exactly the same thing, influencer marketing, the market's saturated, like the ship sailed. So that changes things quite a bit.
So then you've got to innovate. It's like, well, they found their niche. They were on the crest of that wave, or when it just started. I think, it's the situation that you've now got to be really creative.
You've got to innovate. But Gary's saying, James, that not many people can do this.
The same thing. But they could have said exactly the same thing when Gymshark started. They could have said, well, there's Nike, there's Adidas, there's Puma.
But there's not many Gymsharks.
There's not many Gymsharks.
You're talking about, maybe 100
as well. And they've disrupted the market. They've got, Andy Murray is one of the guys. They've got sports clubs, rugby clubs and all that. They just guerrilla marketed, came in and disrupted.
But that's what Gary's saying, James. We're talking about anomalies. We're shining the anomaly with a survivorship bias and saying, look, you can do it. And what Gary's saying is this causes mental health problems because you're a failure if you haven't done it, and this person can do it. They're telling you, buy my book, buy my course. I'm giving you the information. I've done it multiple times. If you can't do it, you're a failure. And on the other side, Daniel Priestley is saying, if you tell people that and they haven't got any agency and they feel like everything's to do with, taxing the rich and it's society's problem, that feeling of lack of agency causes mental health problems. So they're coming at it from
I get it.
Two different ways. Is it personal responsibility, or is it a systems problem? What do you think, John?
I mean, I've bought these books. I've listened to the podcasts. I've listened to the books on Audible. And you kind of read the blurb or you hear about it on another podcast, and then you go, oh, this is the answer. Yeah. And you buy it and you read it and you make sure, and you have to force yourself sometimes to read through these things but you absorb it. You kind of go, yeah, this is it now. I'm absolutely 100% sure this is what I need to do. It's the blueprint for success. And then 6 months down the line, you've not implemented anything in that book whatsoever.
And how many people do you think do that, James? I'm thinking it's high 90s who actually read it, take in the knowledge, and become, successful. That's what I'm saying.
So you'll go to these.
We're not doing it.
Tony Robbins events. I've never been, so I can't comment on what it's like. But I have spoken to people who have been, and maybe they're a day, maybe they're 3 days, even 5-day ones. And they're whipped up into this sense of euphoria that anything is possible at the time that they're there. They feel incredible. The energy in the room is unbelievable. Anything is possible. And then they come away and they'll be enthused by it for maybe a couple of weeks. And then reality kicks in.
Yep. Steve said, how about Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, 3 feet from gold? Yeah. I don't know how many times in the last 20 years I wrote out the I think it's 15 lessons of Think and Grow Rich with I didn't do too well in the sexual transmutation one, to be honest. So have you read the book, James?
I have.
Yeah, it's not worked for us yet. We keep thinking about it. Maybe we have to do it. But again, some great advice in there. And most of the self-help books originating from a lot of the, having a positive intention, set yourself up to win, do all the things they say and Think and Grow Rich. I get it. But in reality, it's not really working out that way. And I guess a lot of the people that made their money didn't read Think and Grow Rich.
I'm fascinated by, how these books become legend.
They become a thing, don't they? Yeah.
Carnegie, How to Make Friends and Influence People, Think and Grow Rich.
7 Habits of Successful
people.
COVID,
I mean, go back to we've talked about Stoicism. And because it came from ancient Rome, and you've got Greek philosophers there as well, that it's just because it was written so long ago, it's revered.
Sounds nice, yeah.
And we're all sort of modeling ourselves on people that lived thousands of years ago. And because it was written back then,
it's were posh, weren't they, James?
The blueprint. But it's the things that
Steve,
they were
Steve said, I never give up because what if I'm 3 feet from a goal?
Away.
I know that's what we say, isn't it? We think we're 3 feet away, or we're digging in the wrong direction. You're thinking, this is the turning point. This is it. I've just got to keep. And that's. But if you don't have hope, then or you don't try, then you've got no chance. That's one view. But I think what Gary's saying is this is about individualization. This is the stuff from the documentary Century of the Self, where it's pushed into being the individual. It's about self-help, self-development, the self. It's not about the collective. And Gary's saying we need to come together as a collective and look systemically. I actually think Gary's advice about taxing the rich will be a plaster on a much bigger problem. I don't even think taxing 1% is going to be more systemic. I think the loop of the psychology of market economics will then result in exactly the same outcomes. I think it just it's not a moral thing in terms of it bad. It's like we was at one of the richest investment firms yesterday in a meeting. These people are super nice. I met a guy who just helps rich people find properties. I was speaking to him. He just said, these are the nicest people you'll ever meet. Yeah, you can say, okay, yeah, of course they're nice because, they've won the game. You could say that, but I think there's a part of it
quite easily.
Yeah, there's a part of it is of when you're if I gave you 10 million now, maybe your mindset would be to preserve it naturally, wouldn't it? You sort of become, I don't know what that's like to be able to be in that mindset of having to preserve something. But I can imagine once you got it, you've got a new fear, haven't you? So I can see with the rich, and what Gary's saying is that most of these economists and most of the people in banking, most of the people making decisions in Oxford and Cambridge, they are the people that are winning. So why would you want to change something if you're winning? And I get it. I'm from poverty, worse than Gary, and I get it. I can understand how a rich person, why would you want to change society if you're winning? James?
Sorry.
They've won the game. They're the end level boss now.
Yeah. I did start to drift off then a little bit, I have to be saying.
Yeah. So I think, Steve, I'm with you. They're winning the game, but what happens if you're on like a desert island? You hoard all the food. Basically, the farmers that are making your food can no longer eat. The farmers die, and then all your food rots away, and then you die. So I think what can happen eventually is that if you hoard, then the pitchforks come out. Sort of like what they did in the Russian Revolution when they basically killed all of their royal family. There's been other revolutions before, and I know that a lot of billionaires, they have security watching security because they are so fearful that people are going to come out and take things. And if people are pushed to the edge, things can get really bad. And I think that's what potentially could happen, James.
I believe that we're in the sort of the start of a bit of a revolution. I think
I think so.
Like Gary being the kind of voice of this, and the fact that you've been talking about him quite a lot, and then all of a sudden he pops up on a very popular podcast, is going to start people having that conversation. And there's an awareness, and there'll be a dissatisfaction with kind of where we're at. And all it takes is for a few people to get behind it and to galvanize. And, there's going to be a groundswell of opinion. Yeah. Get educated, start figuring out what the system is doing to people, how it's keeping them down, how it's suppressing them and, controlling them. And they won't stand for it. It's going to be really interesting where we go from here, and throw AI into the mix as well. And one of the things that came out yesterday is investment around AI, that they're seeing the markets rallying around companies that are heavily investing in AI. So if you are in the investment markets looking for, companies that are developing AI, they are massively
and eye trouble, wasn't it? They was talking about people who's got trouble with their eyes watching too many screens. We did the article on screens, and then they said about the aging population. That's a huge market. These are inside tips we're giving people here from the top people in investment firms. Yeah. So,
and that particular company that does fertility, I think it was fertility treatments as well.
Fertility treatment, because women are having babies longer. But it's all coming back round to the economic system, isn't it? People saying they're having less kids. We're below the replacement age now. I think it was 2.1 for it was meant to be 2.1 for birth replacement. Now it's like 1.4. So that's going to cause a massive problem when there's an aging population. So there's all sorts of things that this economic system's doing. It's fracturing, for me, society. It's definitely fracturing relationships because of the financial pressures on both sides. It's completely altering
what I think the answer is,
roles.
Mate? In my opinion, just before you read out Steve's other comment, in my opinion, the answer is we have to try to get ourselves in a situation where we don't dehumanize, that we think about the individuals in these organizations, that we hold individuals accountable and not just look at corporates as faceless entities, that they've all got human beings working within them.
Yeah.
So all the time we just kind of put them into this sort of homogenous blob of an entity that say corporates are this, corporates are that. And, the wealthy are this, oligarchs, all these kind of terms serve to dehumanize.
You have your psychopaths, don't you? But in general, they're quite nice, James.
Of course you do. But as soon as you then start to take the humanity out of it, it's very easy to demonize and to be incredibly critical of an entity that doesn't contain human beings within it. So keeping a fixed eye on the individuals that are making the decisions, that you then take the time to inquire as to who that person is, what the intentions are, and not to just see it as a faceless mass that we can all kind of rally against, that there are individuals in that entity, and seeing it as such. Because
there's a lot of layers, James, isn't there? It's like there's people at the top, but people down below.
But everybody gets tarred. Everybody gets tarred with the same brush.
And they don't really know the impact of their decisions. You don't really think about children mining precious metals in Africa when you buy your iPhone, do you? So people are making all of these.
They don't want to think about decisions. That. They don't want to think when they pick this thing up that they're so attached to emotionally. What somebody had to go through to make that. And I keep using the analogy of going to the supermarket and seeing a piece of meat in a cellophane wrap, all nicely presented with a nice label on it, with a friendly picture on it of a cow grazing and all that sort of thing. You haven't thought about what that cow went through.
You don't,
because if you did, you possibly wouldn't engage in it like we do. But
no, you totally change your mind. That's the same with everything, isn't it, in the economy? We talk with Steve here. He says, if the problem you're trying to solve and the way you're doing it isn't cutting it, pivot, find a new way. Pivot? Yeah, that's the pivot. It's like the tech word, isn't it? A lot of these companies are trying to find product market fit.
I mean, bloody good advice. But is that kind of oversimplifying it? I think if you're in a situation where, and I've been in that situation, so I'm talking personally.
You can pivot too much.
You can't. Yeah, but you can't see the wood for the trees.
No, you don't know.
And until you're in the right mindset and to see a glimmer of hope, you've got that chink of light that you can then start to move towards. And serendipity, whether you believe in luck or you don't, we were talking about that yesterday. And I'm not a great believer in luck. But there's some things that happen in the universe that allow you to be able to see that chink of light and then start to move towards it. But if you can't see it, then a pivot, I mean, getting up and breathing is difficult enough, let alone pivoting. So, it's perhaps oversimplistic to say that. And again, are we just quoting kind of the vernacular that's pumped out in the ether of social media that, if it's not working, it's like kill it and kill it fast. If it doesn't seem to be working, you've got to be agile, you've got to move. I completely agree. But there's circumstances where you can't see the wood for the trees. But going back to that kind of, digging for gold thing, it's like you could be digging towards a piece of shit. It's still there, but you're tunneling away and it's really not what you want. So 100%. I guess you've got to keep sort of just checking back on yourself and going, is this working? And sometimes you've got to make a decision. Not making a decision is the wrong thing.
And the winners write the history books, don't they, James? That's the thing. It's easy if you've already won to say about
and that's what I struggle with.
Gold and stuff. The winners write history books, so that's the difficult part with that. But in terms of statistics, James, the amount of businesses that start, I think it was something like 30% are dead within the first 12 months, 50% by the first 5 years. Even when you go to venture capitalists trying to get money for your business, even they recognize that for every 10 businesses that they invest in, possibly 80% are going to flop and 1 or 2 are going to pay for the rest of them. So there's a lot of So Daniel Priestley's talking about the liberation of entrepreneurs. I get it. There's going to be a few that do break free. And what else are we going to do? You're going to sit there, wait for the government, wait for society to change. But I think there's bigger structural problems in terms of thinking first principles. We'll bring Stephen here and then I'll talk first principles. I get blinded by the trees all the time. I've made sure I've got a few trusted people who will literally tell me straight when I need to make changes. It's good to have people around you to give you blind spots, but sometimes you've got voices around you. How do they know? Sometimes
that's my caveat. And where are they coming from? Are they coming from fear? Or are they coming from,
that's the difficulty with Hormozy stuff, James, isn't it? Because it was a difference between how much he said what he said about his PA. He said, look, she said, in every business, the grass always looks greener on the other side, but there's still shit. There's shit everywhere. So it's how much do you push, because it's going to be hard in every business. And he calls it niche hopping or niche swapping or something like that. That's where he sees entrepreneurs. They get to 6 months and then they feel like, oh, actually, this is quite hard. And it's the shiny object syndrome. And they think, oh, that opportunity looks better. Let me jump to the next one. And they're back right down to the bottom of the ladder again. They climb that one, realize how hard it is. Yeah. And then they do that. I've done that many a times. And then then they've spent the last 10 years hopping from vehicle to niche to this to that, when really they could have stuck something out. So
could have been months away from a breakthrough, but because you've kind of second guessed yourself and freaked yourself out, but you then go, another opportunity comes along. It's the kind of the fear of missing out, or it's that you don't want to feel like you've been wasting your time.
Yeah, when somebody else is winning, it looks like crypto.
Down the pub told
maybe
me
I should do crypto.
It's a really good thing to do.
It's a difficult one, isn't it? But in terms of the market economics thing, I personally like following a guy called Peter Joseph, who started a documentary series called The Zeitgeist Movement. He wrote a book called The New Human Rights Movement. He's got a podcast called Revolution Now. I don't see eye to eye on him with him on some subjects. Normally on a personality level, the way he comes across, I'm not a massive fan of that. But in terms of his work and his outlook, I think he's got some real depth in terms of what market psychology is, how it's not a moral thing. The outcomes are inequality. It's more like compound interest. The more you have, the more you can make, and you get further and further away. But I do see where Priestley's coming from when he said, look, if you give children who have inherited money, I think it said something like 60% of them are going to lose it because they don't know how to make it, and it's a preservation game, and you've got to innovate and those type of things. So I get both sides of the coin. But we're living in weird times, James. Like the statistics, we've gone from 1 to 8 billion in the last 200 years. We're going through a crazy technological shift. This is unheard of. It's not been seen before. We've had 2 world wars. We've had revolutions in Russia, in other countries. America's relatively new. Electricity's new. Antibiotics is relatively new. We've only recently just found out the world's potentially not flat. Even that's being debated. So there's all these things going on, James, where everything's new, isn't it? The internet's new. AI is new. It's hard to fathom where things are going to go. But I like what Elon Musk is saying about first principles thinking. Let's solve the problem. That's something that wasn't talked about in the interview with Priestley and Stevenson, was let's attack problems from first principles on a systemic level. Okay, we've got housing problem. Let's go back to the basics, not about how to create money, then to gain access to buy something. Let's go and attack the problem and think about it in a different way. Like sort of Einstein says, if you want to solve a problem, firstly, you got to be able to define it. That's the hard bit. But you've got to think greater than the problem. You got to think differently.
But do you think it's too big a problem to solve? I mean, if you go back to basics, certainly on housing,
it's the easiest
and you
problem.
say, well, let's just put a halt here where we're at. We can't continue going exponentially the way we're going. It's unsustainable.
Yeah.
So, is there a fear that then the whole thing will just come down like a house of cards? That you pull the rug out from underneath and it's just like this thing, that everything then implodes. There's the fear that actually if you change things wholesale, that everything then gets impacted and we're really, really in the shit. Is there a fear that actually we've got to let this thing keep running and running because A, the problem's too big, and B, the aftermath is, too scary to even start to contemplate?
Yeah. I think, James, we're thinking about things on too short a time horizon. This is a blink of, not even a blink of an eye in terms of humanity, civilization. We're just right at the cusp of something we can't even comprehend. The changes, like with Daniel was saying, in the last 100, 200 years have just been mind-blowing. You try and explain to someone in the 1800s about what life's like now, doing FaceTime and video calls and what business is like, you couldn't even predict it. You'd talk about somebody who went to university in the 90s to do marketing, and social media didn't exist. It's a completely different game. So who knows what's going to be around the corner. Steve says, do you think not making a decision is worse than making lots of bad ones until you find the right one?
So this is fear of failure, Steve. I think we could probably categorize this as fear of failure.
Yeah, and being able to make good decisions.
About fucking up and being wrong, that you then get that analysis paralysis thing. Sorry for saying that, but it's something that possibly everybody can understand.
Yeah.
And I think it's that fear that by, continuously making bad decisions, you then stop making and you just become paralyzed. But as long as you're learning from those decisions that create perhaps not the outcome that you're after, then you can start to kind of iterate and then move towards something that will work out. But if you're constantly making decisions and the same decisions, or making the same judgments as before and not really focusing on what you've learned, then you can't expect to get anything different. But we need to encourage failure, I think, in all things, in a manageable way that's not catastrophic.
Yeah,
they have to be sort of considered, and making sure that you're not sort of massively exposed. But I think fear of failure is something that really keeps you back.
And I know it sounds a bit woo-woo, but if you go to the whole, I don't even know if it is a thing with a quantum thing and laws of attraction and belief, sometimes with some of these people, they have unwavering belief, even when people doubt them. Maybe sort of like that woman who created the Harry Potter thing. How many times was she turned down in terms of publishers?
J.K. Rowling.
Yeah, J.K. Rowling. Keep going, keep going. There is a level, but again, this is a personality type. Maybe just in this phase of capitalism at this specific time, that particular personality trait of perseverance, resilience, timing. But again, how many other people that wrote amazing books just wasn't at the right place, right time, didn't get picked up, wrong character. There could be a million J.K. Rowlings on benefits still.
Or even started to write the book and then chucked it in the bin because they just thought it was a load of crap.
They got run over by a bus. Something happened to them. But something that is interesting with inequality, James, there was, the abolishment of slavery was only in 1833. So we're not even 200 years into abolishment. Imagine that, human, like Western world, people owning slaves. And these slaves obviously built the infrastructure of a lot of things, whether that's, you know,
Mm.
the cotton
And generations
field,
of generations of generations living
generations of slaves. So what happened was, when slavery was abolished, the government, UK English government, said, we need to compensate people, not the slaves.
No,
We
the
need to
slave owners.
compensate the slave owners for losing their slaves. So what percentage of the GDP, of UK GDP, English GDP, I think it was, do you think was given out to slave owners in 1833?
Of GDP.
Of GDP percentage, yeah.
God, it's not going to be a high percentage, is it? Relatively high percentage.
Just give me a number, James. Anybody out there on the live? How much of the GDP was given to the slave owners? 40%.
How much?
40% of the GDP was given to the slave owners as compensation for losing their slaves. So we had to take out massive loans. The governments and stuff took out massive loans to actually pay this, you know, compensation for the abolishment of slavery. When do you think those loans were paid back,
Very
James?
recently. 1980s?
2015. So people has been making money off the interest of slavery that, you know, us taxpayers are paying. You know, we'll be paying.
Reparations from the Second World War have only just recently been settled, haven't they?
So we've only just finished off paying to rich people, predominantly rich people, slave owners, the compensation for that. So you can see there's entrenched inequality systemically, and Gary is right in the sense there is some deep rooted problems, and statistically, even though there are the anomalies, there are the people that do escape and they are seen as the heroes, the entrepreneurs, but that's not the majority. And the people that read the books, you know, and they try and they're working hard, and we've got to decouple working hard from outcomes, because there's plenty of people with 3 jobs, you know, don't do anything. They work their fingers to the bone and they've got nothing. And you can have £1 million that your mum or dad gave you, and you could make 50 grand a year passively from doing nothing. You've literally done nothing and made 50 grand. And there's people that just can't survive now. And we're at a breaking point. AI is going to accelerate that because of job displacement. We're seeing it, even coders are being displaced. And we can see it from the questions that I asked in this meeting in the investment firm. You know, what's going to happen with house prices in the next 10 years? They're probably going to go up, like Gary said. And then the middle class are going to be pushed out. Steve, thanks for joining, Steve. No, I appreciate that. Steve. Great chat, guys. I've got to go. Be well. I know we waffle on for a long time. I do on this subject anyway. I love this subject.
You do, mate. You do.
But let's leave it there, James. I think we've
well and truly glazed.
I think, but that's a good point, James, about your eyes glazing, because if you're not, it's like anything. It's like playing a musical instrument. If you haven't been in it and you can't play it and it sounds bad, then you're less likely to get involved with it. If you've got a base knowledge and you sort of understand the frameworks, then you can engage.
Yeah, and it's an education piece, and I think we all have the responsibility to get educated.
Yeah,
it's not enough to say that, well, I don't understand, so I'm not going to engage with it. I think it's our responsibility, it's my responsibility to be more educated around it, for sure.
When they said to people, is there any questions?
Nobody asked.
There was nobody asked questions, you know, because if you don't understand the context of the
don't want to look stupid.
You don't want to look stupid. You don't really know what to ask.
Yeah.
It's only that I've been researching it that I can ask questions and say, okay, maybe is something missing here, or what do we think of this, or a different angle? But if you don't know the subject, then how can you even ask a question? So I think it's up to people to become educated. Children have got to become educated. And basically, we did an article on the schooling system, James. I don't know if you've seen it today, but Donald Trump's taken down the education department in America. So maybe something we can talk about next week. Did you see that?
But it's just ammunition for us, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all change, isn't it? It's all change.
Material for us, I should say, not ammunition. I didn't.
But no, I'd like to thank Stephen Bartlett. I think these things are great. We'd like to do it as well. Get people with opposing views, bring them both on, have a discussion, understand both sides. I think Daniel did fantastic on that.
I do.
He came across really well. He made his point. For me, I don't think entrepreneurship, I think it's great. I think it's part of this evolution. That is something that, what else are you going to do? You can't rely on the system to change. I'm behind it. I'm going to follow what Daniel's doing. But I also understand that could be a plaster, the same as what Gary's is, a plaster on a much bigger systemic problem. We need to sort out first principles problem solving with food, education, housing. Then you could have this capitalist game above that. But once you get an infrastructure in place, like a universally advanced living standard, I think you can transform society, because then you're going to have to try and convince people to work in meaningful jobs, rather than at the moment they're just coerced into doing things to pay interest on mortgages, housing problems. It's only bricks and mortar. It's better being outside anyway. So we're spending our whole lives just to pay for these bricks, when it's literally like paying for a cave that you're in never, because you're trying to pay for it. So we got to think first principles to solve these problems, and then you can have all the fluffy stuff on top of it if you want to do that. But I don't think people will. I think they're going to be more creative. But it's a great conversation, and I'm glad they're having it, because the problems are there, James. So we need to address them.
100%.
Thanks for listening, James.
Well, thanks to Steve. So from Steve Bartlett to Steve Whittle.
Steve Whittle, yeah. Keep going, Steve. What's the other choice? I get it. We need systemic change.
Thank you for your honesty, mate, as well.
And,
thank
you to Simon Ripton, MBA.
Oh yes,
not NBA basketball. It's NBA there, James.
NBA.
Take care, guys. Have a fantastic weekend. I could speak for another hour on this. This shows the passion. You're not so into this vibe, are you, James?
Mate, I'm learning. I'm on my uptick in learning on this.
Yeah.
I think I've been in the dark of this for too long, and again it's that ignorance of kind of not knowing about it, not taking the time to understand it. And I, count myself part of the general populace that, because it's a complicated subject, that you just shut down. But we can all do better, including myself.
Yeah.
So
and you have to now, 'cause it's on your doorstep, isn't it? Your kids can't buy a property, so it's right on your doorstep.
The reality is right there. The reality is right there. Sure.
So we're going to have to talk about this going forwards. But no, thanks everybody. And this is great. Let's have open discourse. And there's, we're all trying to make lives better. It's better that everybody has, is doing well. And the amount of tech now, the potential is just unbelievable. It is. We could liberate. We could have unbelievable abundance. Maybe entrepreneurship is part of that. People creating stuff. Maybe there's different ways of doing things, first principles problem solving, and Gary might be right in a plaster for taxing very wealthy people. Who knows? That could have negative or positive knock-on effects. It's hard to tell, but all we know is change is happening. There's an evolution, and we're going to have to try to adapt.
I think there's a balance to be struck, isn't there? I think, you've got to figure out what are the long-term consequences of any kind of action. So like taxing the rich, but like Daniel was saying is the sort of the brain drain or the wealth drain, that they'll just go elsewhere. You know, they are incredibly mobile, as he said. They don't have to be located anywhere to be able to do the business that they do. So they'll just go to the places where, you know, it's more tax efficient and beneficial to them.
Yeah. But will it eat itself, James? That's the thing. I'm not really too sure. I sort of lean in towards Gary's view that things could get real ugly. And I think that's just life sometimes. People don't change unless the pain of change is higher than the pain of staying the same. Rich people are going to feel it. They might be winning, but the pitchforks could come out big time. And there could be issues. So, yeah, let's just keep talking about it and try and figure out some problems.
We'll do that. We'll do that.
Okay, James, have a good weekend, sir. You take care, man.
And you, buddy.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.